Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be. We're waiting for one more, but he's tardy. We'll let him. We'll wait a little bit longer. We were just talking to Nicola about the knockoff believer that he's got. You think you've got a knockoff believer, or a very well copied believer, or what do you think? What's the thing you've got that you're putting together now, Nicola?
Well, it's the Flying Dragon.
And
Flying Dragon.
Well,
Is that are we on Game of Thrones? Come on.
well, that's what they decided to call it. After all, it was made, manufactured, designed, etc. in China, and they're interested in dragons, so no surprises with the name. However, I don't think it was made by the same manufacturer as the Believer, because even though the similarities are a lot and strong, there are some subtle differences that I think give it away that it's not the same manufacturer. Because most notably now, when I was putting the two fuselage halves together, they weren't as good of a fit as the Believer was. So not sure what that's about. I needed to convince them with some woodworking clamps to
really,
yeah,
woodworking. That's flipping unusual for foamies.
Yeah. Well, that's what it took. And also, today I finally got to the wiring and I started doing the wing connectors, and that is the most ridiculous thing I have seen. I mean, if it were the Believer manufacturers, they already have that connector. They would have used the same thing. This is just tedious.
Oh, here's Richard. I was going to say they're very good on the Believer. Here's Richard. Good evening, Richard.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good evening. I'm very well. How are you?
We're very good, thank you. We're just talking about Nicola's Flying Dragon. I think we said Flying Dragon, didn't we?
Yeah.
But it's a separate lift thrust, I believe. It's a VTOL.
Well, it can be. Not
That's
this
actually a
one,
tilt
at least
one.
not now.
Oh, you're just leaving it as a standard big Believer.
Oh, I don't have the VTOL setup.
That'll do it.
Yeah, but it can be either single motor or twin motor, or, if you're feeling adventurous, tri-motor, tri-tractor motor.
That's right. Is that motor on the nose, is that a detachable nose, or is that fitting all there all the time?
It's detachable. And I was thinking of maybe putting a motor there first while I wait for some motors for the twin setup to arrive, and test it with a single motor first and a huge, like 17 by 10 or 12-inch prop, something like that. And then compare the efficiency numbers between that and a twin motor with smaller props. But I don't have a suitable motor for the nose, and the one that I have, it's copter. It's designed for copter, so I can't fit a proper adapter on it. And I want to put a folding prop, otherwise every landing is gonna be a new prop.
Folding prop.
And if it's not folding, a 17-inch prop on the nose of that thing is gonna look absolutely ridiculous.
It's all about image. So when can we expect the video of that one then, Nicola?
Oh, maybe not for another 2 or 3 weeks, because I have to finish it up, figure out what to equip it with while I wait for the proper EASAs and motors to arrive from China. And I need to do 2 other reviews of 2 other smaller planes before that.
Waiting for stuff from China might be an issue now, mightn't it?
Not really. Some stuff shipped beginning of February and arrived in 10 days. So maybe people stopped ordering from China and now things move along faster because there are fewer packages to move along.
It might very well be. Be. All right, let's hop and skip along to the main event, I guess. I don't know. How should we start? Should we let Ian start this main event? You can be the lead rant on this, and we've got Richard, our expert here. So we go. Go on then, Mad. You make something up to lead into this.
Make something up. I was accused of that at the end of last week, so I could fit straight in with that one. Obviously, it's the bombshell. I think a bombshell is probably the correct term for this. Is that the UK intends to also pull out of EASA as part of our Brexit. Now, the original plan wasn't that, as far as I was aware. Obviously, if we just look at drone operators specifically. And I think it's probably right in saying this is going to affect everything, let alone us in our little corner of the world. So whilst we can get on our soapbox and shout and scream, the reality is there's a lot of more bigger problems around this that's yet to come. But the reality is, we were expecting to adopt EU 2019 945 and 947 from the 1st of July this year, which is everything around the new regulations. We were getting our heads around it. We've been almost singing its praises in the sense of it's a lot better than what the damn FAA are trying to introduce in the US. And whilst it still had a lot of loopholes for commercial operators because the CAA have failed to really define where PFCOs are going to end up in all of this, they've laid out the path for this new thing called a GVC and where everyone is there, yet the existing PFCOs have sort of been left behind and not really given any guidance and told to shut up and get on with it, and we'll tell you when you need to know. However, obviously, at the end of the week, it was announced. Who was it who announced it, Gary? I've forgotten his name.
Sharps.
Yes, Grant Sharps, around the fact that we intend to also step out of EASA. And that very...
Hang on a minute, let me stop you there, Ian. Where did he announce it?
He announced it in the US, if I believe.
Hang on, let me just stop you there, Ian. The aircraft that he flies, which register is it on?
Oh, I couldn't possibly comment. Would you know what that is?
I think it's on the N register.
Is
I think
it?
Mr. Schapp has an airplane on the N register and he announced it in America. Far be it for me to say anything.
It's all coincidental. Now, very quickly, those of us who know people, like none of it, I'm certainly no authority, but I certainly know people who like to pick off. It was clear very quickly this caught a lot of people off guard in all sorts of places. And I think it was end of Friday I was hearing that this could have massive implications for everything we're already expecting to come in place in July. In fact, it may not even happen. Now, I tweeted a few things, I posted a few comments, and all the NQEs got upset very quickly and said, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. However, he's 100% accurate, 100% true. However, today when they've gone to get their clarification from the CAA, they haven't got it because, or yesterday I should say, they didn't get it because the reality was, I'm not even sure they knew. And this is probably where Richard is best stepping in because he knows this side of it inside out.
Yeah, thanks, Mad's Mess. I think my view is a lot of people were caught on the hop, and my best guess is quite a few people in the CAA did not actually know that this was going to happen, and they were caught by surprise. And I think the evidence is the fact that we've seen nothing promulgated from the CAA or the DFT that supports this statement, apart from Grant Shapps' own statement that he's made. And my concern when I read into this a lot more is we're going to stick with EASA until the end of the year, and then we come out. So you're going to have your GVS and your A2 CFC running. You're going to have PFCO still running for at least the next 2 years. And then at the end of this year, when they decide that, and this is what I think they're going to do, if they are going to be smart, is cherry pick the right law or the good law that would be useful to our industry. We could then have 3 streams of commercial operators running. Question, could the CAA, or does the CAA have the resources to accommodate 3 streams of different commercial operators? I say no, absolutely no, right off the bat. And I don't think they will, they won't have the capacity to deal with it. And I don't think they've got the capability either. And this could be the big mess that is going to be created. So what are the options around the law? Either We still run with the EASA, so we take it and run with it. We don't do it at all. So all the investment that's gone in with the NQEs and then setting up their training programs and everything else is going to be an abortive cost. Or we cherry pick the good law, which can still support some of the work that the NQEs have invested in to support their aspect of the industry. Now, the danger is obviously we're going to end up with 3 streams of commercial operators at the end of 2020, which I think is going to be an absolute nightmare. I mean, it's quite complicated now as it is because not everybody. We've seen no publications from the DFT or the CAA on the new EASA regulations and how they're going to play out. All we've seen are some NQEs that have been briefed on it by the CAA and what they're putting out. So what we're seeing is a number of NQEs with their interpretation and their stamp on what it means for them, because it's in their interest to do it that way because they need to generate income from it. So they will be slightly biased, but at the end of the day, it's just something you have to deal with. So it's really, for commercial operators, I think you're going to have more questions. Now, you mentioned to the government of the drone bill. Now,
is it just me, or is it?
Yeah, you're dropping out, Richard. You've started
it's not just you.
You started to go.
Come back, Richard. Come back.
Yeah.
Come back. Come back, Richard.
Hello.
Oh,
hello.
There we go. There we are.
Hello. So
the Wi-Fi played up.
I think it probably is. I'm not on the best Wi-Fi where I am. But what I think is going to be a great difficulty is the fact that you're going to have three different commercial operators, and somehow the police are going to have to enforce this when the drone bill comes in. Yeah. They don't even understand where we are now. And so the letter I've written to the DFT, which I got a response for, which I've also published on LinkedIn, you may have seen it, also now refers to operational responders, which comes from the counter drone bill. So what we're getting back from the DFT is a confusing statement about how they're going to train the police and everything else. And they've tried to wrap it up within the counter drone bill, which doesn't make any sense at all. So we're going to have a real confused position. And we're going to have a lot of people who aren't going to be clear on A, where they stand as far as operating commercially. B, I have no confidence at the moment in the police having any ability really to be able to enforce any provision of the drone bill. And if they do, I think it's going to be a big can of worms when they do it. And so I think what we're in danger of doing is, from these EASA regulations, when we come out, I'm a firm believer in let's get out of your EU law and let's get on and make it our own. There's potentially a great opportunity here to take the bull by its horns, model and frame the law in a way that's useful to everybody, so we can actually develop our UAV or UAS industry in a way that we want. And this is the golden opportunity now. So I've been banging a drum for the last couple of months to change the drone bill, but I think now we've got an opportunity to change a lot more.
It is interesting because the one point you made there, Richard, was, I'm a PFCO. We do not know what's happening. And the real interesting one is a couple of NQEs have taken it upon themselves, or REs as they are now, to become the CAA spokespersons. And I kicked a little bit back on that on Friday, saying everyone appreciates the info, but you are not the press arm of the CAA. And to this day, there is no document that tells me what happens in July. There is no guidance. We are being told that guys who currently have an authorization from or a recommendation from an NQE but are not a current PFCO, that is going to be worthless in 3 months. We're being told that we're okay, just renew, it will be fine. Yet technically the PFCO can't exist after July because it's a permission for commercial operation, and that ceases to be part of the requirements from the 1st of July. So it's going to have to turn into an operational authorization to allow us to continue what we're doing today and remove the commercial operation aspect. But yet there's no document to say they're going to do that. And you've got all the NQEs running around saying, it's fine, you'll be able to do everything you want to do. that's okay, but the CAA are saying nothing. And right now we are 15 weeks off a change that could end people's businesses. That's not pretend. We assume it's all going to be okay, but until there is a sheet of paper that tells me it's going to be okay, how does anyone who is doing this for a living protect themselves and know where they stand? Because just saying it'll be fine isn't good enough. I've witnessed the introduction of the electrical regulations. Before, electricians never used to have to be qualified and had to be registered. I actually went through that when it happened. I've seen the change from gas safe, from where we were at originally, from Corgi to gas safe. And throughout those processes, whenever there's been a mass change in legislation that affects business, there's been years stepping up to it. It was people were led down the path for when they had to introduce the electric regs. And it wasn't just 6 months, you've got to get on with it. So we're being completely kept in the dark here. And I do agree they don't know themselves, but they knew where they were getting up until last week. There's no excuse up until last week. Okay, there's an excuse now, but there wasn't last week.
I agree. There was an excuse, if you put it that way. There's certainly a logical reason as to why we've not, why they haven't got to this point. But don't forget, the DFT are responsible for setting policy, which sets the law. They do it on advice from the CAA, and I think that's a really important distinction, because the CAA are ultimately the regulator, and we've seen in the recent documentation that when it comes to enforcement, they have a memorandum of understanding with the police that's in place, and ultimately DFT are responsible for setting the parameters, because they'll recommend the law to Parliament, and off it goes. And that's what we've seen in the drone bill. And I've heard a couple of interesting things lately to say that, the drone bill costs a huge amount of money, and they use a consultant to do it. I didn't actually know that. I thought it was government lawyers who were drafting the law. And ultimately, why have we got a consultant doing it that isn't involved or consulting with the industry on where it should be? And you could almost say the same with the EASA regulations and the way that they've come in. Okay, the standard scenarios that they've taken have actually come from the French and the Spanish, because they're much more developed when it comes to BV loss than we are. And that's where those standard scenarios originated from within Europe, so that we could use BV loss on a much more regular basis. And the way that they've tried to offset some of that risk is through the CE marking of new platforms, because they are going to be at a much higher standard, or whatever standard it is that they've deemed to be fit. So we've got a number of things that are playing along at the moment, but it really is the meandering river. And, and who knows where it's going to take us, because, I've got balls, but they're not crystal, unfortunately. And I'd love to put the crystal ball on this and do some serious gazing as to where this is going to go, because, my real concern is, and I'm a PFCO holder as well, and my concern is, what is it going to do to the industry? Because it's really at this point where, we've got over 5,000 PFCO holders that are registered, and they're not all making money. Most have second jobs, and we're really in danger of breaking this. But a lot of these people are still innovating in ways that we hadn't conceived or have been conceptualized yet. So the industry is still fairly embryonic, although we've been going for a number of years. We're in danger of tipping the scales back the other way. And do we want some of the bad press that the US are getting around, their marking scheme and identification scheme, or and all the rest of it, or not? Or do we want to be a leader in the field? And I think cherry picking some of the stuff from the EU, because they have done a lot of work, and so the CAA, don't forget, have been consulting in the last number of years with EASA on these regulations as well. So they're in a good place to say, actually, we like this for these reasons, or we like that for those reasons, and put it out to us, and let us help them draft that and steer that in a way that's going to benefit, PFCO holders, but NQEs as well, and other interested parties. And let's make it much clearer. we've got a great opportunity here, and I think we need to, the industry really needs to get behind this now and start pushing it. I mean, I've had quite a bit of traction from what I've been putting out in terms of writing to MPs and everything else, but I've had some people tell me that they've written to their MPs, and the MPs have said, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy setting up my office after winning the election." What do you do? These are the people that are now employed and represent the people to make good law on our behalf, and that's what they've got to do.
Well, lots of trips to IKEA, things like that. It's got to be done. Now, Louis here. We'll drop back into this, but Louis here, so I'll make sure I mention it because Louis loves a Gatwick story. He loves a Gatwick story, and Richard, you've got a great one. Freedom of Information Act. They've been given a bit of a slap on the wrist. We'll come back to the other thing, but I wanted to get it in to make sure Louis hears this. Tell us a little bit more about that freedom of information stuff. Okay,
so when the whole Gatwick incident happened, Louis, I was called as a person of interest. Bearing in mind, I am a practicing barrister. I'd not long finished working for the Civil Aviation Authority as one of their UAS inspectors. And the police phoned me up as a person of interest for Gatwick, the alleged Gatwick drone incident. So I went through a number of conversations with them. They wanted me to come into the police station. Obviously, I never did because that was never going to happen. It was just a complete waste of time. And the police, from my view, were just playing the numbers game to say back to, the minister, we've knocked on a number of doors, we've made so many phone calls, we've visited so many houses, and we've done all we can to justify the huge expense in overtime pay and everything else. So what I did do is I put in a Freedom of Information Act request, and Freedom of Information Act request was a number of questions actually, and it was about what equipment what evidence they've got around Gatwick, what equipment have they used to counter any alleged drones, what equipment did Sussex Police use themselves, how did they identify the fact that they got a number of drone sighting reports after they put their own drones up, and how is it they got information about me to be a person of interest. So they responded, said they would get back to me. They failed to get back to me within the regulated time frame. So I lodged a complaint with the Information Commissioner's Office. The Information Commissioner's Office wrote to them saying you must respond within so many days. They then again failed to respond in so many days. The Information Commissioner's Office then wrote them an official notice to comply with the Freedom of Information Act request. They failed to respond to that notice. And yesterday I contacted the ICO and they've informed me that they've now instructed their lawyers who are going to write to Sussex Police within the next 7 days for them to respond.
Come on, the Sussex Police must be too busy now because they don't have the Dutch and Duchess of Sussex. So that's their problem.
Yeah, maybe, but when you look through the list of notices that the ICO have written, and I've gone through quite a few, Sussex Police are up there actually for a number of non-compliant requests for Freedom of Information Act requests by people. So they are, they're right up there in terms of misdemeanors. But now, the great thing about the ICO and their enforcement is it's not coming out of my pocket. They're a government agency and they've got to hold, and then their legal mandate is that they must hold public organizations to account when it comes to Freedom of Information Act requests. So that's where we are. And then once I get the request, I'll publish it and you can see what the answers are. If indeed we get it, but it's now in the hands of the ICO's legal department, and I don't know of any other police force that has suffered from or is going to suffer a legal suit from the ICO.
Is there any censure? Is there any kind of censure they can hand out, or is it just exercises in futility, just a slap on the wrist? Can they do anything in terms of handing out a fine or imprisonment or whatever?
Oh, right. So censure comes from maybe could be viewed in two different pieces. So the Sussex Police are at liberty under the Freedom of Information Act to censor what they give me if it's sensitive material or is secret or something like that, is fundamental to the government that they can't disclose. So, for example, if I would not fully expect them to disclose what the counter UAS equipment is going to be, and the reason why I say that is because I gave the same Freedom of Information Act request to the Ministry of Defence and the CAA and the DFT, and they've come along the lines of that. Or they just don't have the information, is why I'm now left with Sussex Police in terms of getting what it is that I want to get from it. So that's one aspect of censure. The other aspect, in terms of what the ICO powers are, they are at liberty to fine organisations, public organisations, for non-compliance. But some of that will be from, if it goes to court and the judge gives them an order, they will have to comply with a lawful court order to do it. And the court may look at other ways of sanctioning them. So they could end up picking up the ICO's legal costs for taking them to court as well. As well as a number of other things that a judge might find in terms of compelling them to comply with the order.
So basically, you're just pushing them to get answers, but they can always do not reply. They can keep up with the silence.
No, I don't think they can. I don't think they can, because ultimately, it will end up at the top of the chain within Sussex Police, and the commissioner responsible will be held to account in some way, shape, or form. So there will be a lot of pressure coming down from a court order in order for them to comply with it, because at the end of the day, they have to comply with a legitimate court order. They are there. They are a police force that are seeking to enforce the law. They can't not comply with the law. It does not set the best example.
Come on,
but that's just what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They're not complying with the law, but there's been no penalties handed out. Will they put the commissioner in prison? What's the guts?
Come on, they have the prison keys. They lock them.
And they can unlock him. Oh, that's the fall down, isn't it? They lock him up, and they unlock it. Yeah.
I'd vote for an ankle bracelet. Give them an ankle bracelet. A remote ID.
Well, this is it. So, I mean, exactly. I mean, we're talking about a civil penalty versus a criminal one here, but I think, let's see what happens. Once the ICO's lawyers write to them, it may be that's just enough for them to respond.
I think you mentioned did you send one off to Ofcom as well? Because I think I saw in your comments you mentioned what frequencies did they use and what permissions because that to me is the absolute sort of nub of it, really. If there was anything really there, who on earth signed it off? Because I don't believe anything has been signed off in the UK yet.
No, it hasn't. So that's another aspect of law that I've done quite a bit of work in, is the counter drone side of stuff. So when you look at the Wireless Telegraphy Act in the UK, it was designed, it's probably as old as you, Mr. Shaky. But it was
very old.
It was very old. But it was designed for the days of when you'd have Radio Caroline in the North Sea, pirate radio station, or you're intercepting old TV messages and things like that. That was what it was designed for. And so what we see now is, you can't intercept any communication willfully. I think that's section 69 under the Act, 68. But there are dispensations, for example, saving life. So if you're doing something for saving life, potentially, because we don't know what the intent of the drone operator is, you could always argue that I'm using my counter drone equipment to prevent that drone from going to this space, because actually that could be a threat to life. I would find it, I'm sure, in my humble opinion, I would say that a judge would find it very difficult to convict somebody if you could genuinely say, with intent, I stopped that drone from flying because I genuinely thought there was a threat to life. And I think, there are some really difficult questions here, because the law is out of date. It is open to interpretation, because I'm also not intercepting on the basis that I'm trying to take an image or voice. What I'm doing is I'm intercepting on the basis that I'm disrupting a drone so that it triggers its safety protocol, so that it'll either return to home, hover where it is until the battery gets 10%, then it flies to home, or it'll land where it is. Therefore, I've neutralized the threat. We can safely say that probably 90% of drones on the market have that kind of safety protocol embedded within them. So if I was to use that act and try it, I think, yeah, it is uncertain ground, and there is what lawyers term litigation risk in that. But I'd be willing to test it in court. But you're right, we don't know what the frequencies are, and we don't know, what's going to happen around that. Ofcom don't issue licenses for that sort of stuff. They just don't. So what is the mechanism, the lawful mechanism by which somebody can use it? So there is an act there is a section under the Police Act where the police can lawfully intercept or interrupt communication, and I believe that's where they're going with it. Unless you go to the Prisons Act, and the prison governor does have the power to interfere with communications as well.
And not to military usage, because usually militaries are exempt of all those kinds of regulations, right?
So military may well have exempt, but that exemption would have to still be granted by the Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately,
nothing has yet, has it? Nothing has.
No, I've not seen anything, and the Freedom of Information Act requests that I've asked for haven't provided me with any information to indicate that. Which is why, in my Freedom of Information Act request to Sussex Police, I asked them what the lawful authority was.
Yeah, no, that's the bit I picked up. That made me chuckle, because that's going to be the hard to answer one, I think. Really,
it is because what would be interesting out of it, if you were to dissect it, you've got the Secretary of State, you've got Gatwick Airports, you've got the police. You've got the Ministry of Defence who are called in. You've got the CAA and the DFT on the periphery. So potentially we've got 6 parties. Who's responsible?
You're forgetting the new owners of Gatwick.
Yeah, then pick the keys up yet. So the bloke said, "We'll just shove them through the letterbox," and they hadn't quite picked up the keys, had they? I don't think.
Yeah.
But did the military actually get there in the end?
So there have been pictures of the military on site, but it's not clear what the military were tasked to do.
Are you sure they're military and not just people pretending to be military from counter UAS companies?
That's a good question. One that I'm really not at liberty to answer on in this.
No, okay. Fair enough. No. I had heard, and far be it from me to say, that certain units were told to go, but were stood down, and that would have also indicated to me that all the story was not as was thought to be. Because you would hit the alarm button, wouldn't you, when something was happening? But if you quickly get those particular people to turn around and go home and have another cup of coffee, then you didn't really need them in the first place. So there's so much dodginess to this. I was hoping the other Ian was going to come along, because he's got lots of. They must be really hacked off with the number of Freedom of Information Act bits of paper they've got to sort out now, and he's also got some fantastic questions for them. So questions are being asked.
Yeah, I've put in two more in the last couple of months of the CAA, and they haven't even been acknowledged. So I've put an official complaint in with the CAA today.
So what made you?
That.
Sorry, I'm jumping on you there a bit, Richard. But before I forget what I'm going to say, what made you not be that couple that lived just outside of the airport and be snatched up the police and go in? Just your powerful, positive voice on the telephone. And who would have been? Can you imagine those coppers? They had a bowler hat or something. They had a policeman's helmet, didn't they? And they had a load of names of people with model airplanes and drones in them. They just pulled them out of the hat. And unlucky for them, they pulled your name out, and you're a flipping lawyer. They must have ruined the day they did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I have no idea how they got my name at the moment. I mean, that's not correct. I don't know with certainty how they got my name. I have some ideas about how they might have got it. What I was looking for is some confirmation about that, which they'd have to declare, because somebody somewhere has given them my name and address, which is personal information to me, which is protected under Data Protection Act. So somehow, somewhere, my name has surfaced, and I want to know how, why, and where that happened. Because given my background, that's incredibly important. Because well, in fact, it's not just given my background; it's incredibly important for anybody. Because if you receive a phone call from a detective inspector, then you're fairly high up on the chain. You know, to be asked to come in for a face-to-face meeting, that would put, you know, that would, you know, that would be a great, that would be of great concern to a number of people who do not have a legal qualification. And, you know, the unfortunate pair that got captured, I did phone up the police station to say that I could represent them pro bono, and they said I'm not on the panel. I said, okay, how do I get on the panel? You need to speak to a person who organises the panel. I say, can I have their name and address? No, we can't do that. That's confidential.
And yet, so when I rob a bank, then, and I think I've got away with it, and then they come and find me, would I, as a normal, everyday normal criminal, would I have a right to find out how they got to me eventually? Could I say, well, how did you get my name?
Ultimately, that would come out in their evidence as part of their prosecution case against you.
Okay.
Because it would have to identify you as that, not only as a person of interest, but actually a suspect and somebody who they, on, you know, when the public prosecutor takes on their two-stage test to determine whether it's you know, a high probability of success of prosecution and it's in the public interest, they would then look to prosecute you, and that would confirm that your name is that person, probably, you know, who's going to be indicted.
And then, because I didn't actually rob the bank, but they still felt my collar up for it, could I ask them, like that couple, because they must have got that couple's name from somewhere, probably the neighbour, I think, in that case. But oh yeah, he's got my airplane. You go talk to me over there. But can they not find out the full trail?
Yeah, I'm sure they can. So, you know, I'm sure their lawyers, as part of a wrongful arrest suit, or, you know, an unlawful detention, or whatever it's going to be. I mean, I don't practice that area of law, but you know, they would certainly look to find out why and how it was that they were identified as a person of interest, and why and how it was that they thought that the police had enough evidence to arrest them and bring them in for questioning and detain them. And, you know, ultimately, you know, that would be something that they would have to work through with their legal team in order to discover that information.
But if the police are going to want to contact your interview for any purpose at the moment, can't you just go to your window and hold up a sign like this, and then they'll go away?
Yes, perhaps so.
That will also get you to the front of NEQ today as well, by the way.
This friend of mine works there. I've got maybe have an inside scoop here at the BBC, and they've cleared the floor there this evening. Anyway, that's also got this demonetised. Maybe that's already on the news in England. I don't know, but they've cleared the floor at the BBC today. It's just all a muddle. So, but then the bottom line, this is the DFT again, though, isn't it? Hiding behind all this, isn't it?
I don't know. It could well be. Ultimately, you know, Sussex police have to come up with some answers. And once we know what those answers are, because I've got the answers from all the other agencies, I'll then be able to determine who's actually saying what. You know,
you could compare and contrast.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you know, it's certainly what I intend to do, because this is just further evidence for me in terms of giving me that level of comfort. And I come back to the drone bill again. With respect to police powers, you know, they got it wrong so badly with those unfortunate pair of people around the alleged Gatwick drone incident. You know, what confidence am I actually going to have when they have much wider powers under the law. They can search your person, they can search your vehicle. With a warrant, they can search your house. You're an operator, they can detain your equipment, and then you have to go to the Crown Court to get it back if they don't give it back to you in time. Well, that's no good to an operator who's got jobs the next day and he can't use his equipment.
Well, I'm truth to power, haven't you? It's
if you follow that through, Gary, and so the old driving license days, you could get a 7-day wonder to produce your documents, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, they've put a similar mechanism under the drone bill. So if you don't have your documentation with you, so this could be not just PFCO holders, but it could be, if you haven't done your drone registration, or you haven't got your markings right on your drone, you can produce them within 7 days potentially. That means I can go to any police station in the country, produce my documents. Is that police officer or civilian employed person going to really understand that I've produced the right documents within 7 days when I turn up?
A couple of Sainsbury's receipts and I don't know.
But that's ultimately what they're being asked to do.
Yeah,
you guys have got it easy. In this part of the world, if you don't carry your driver's license, it's an instant fine and points on your license.
Tis here as well. Tis in South Africa as well.
Right, okay.
Yeah. We don't have to produce the thing here. It's about 80 quid because I often forget it, and then every time I forget it, I get pulled over.
Yeah.
But there we are. I must drive guiltily when that happens. So, what do I want to say about this? I want to say I am quite staggered that the police is allowed to cover things up quite so much. Perhaps I shouldn't be so naive, but it's just nonsense. What else are they hiding? Well, do you think we'll ever get to the root of this, to the nub of this nut?
Ideally facts, and we all want the facts as they should be, and that's why we have a really good judicial system in the UK that people rely on in order to establish what the facts in issue actually are, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about what are the facts in issue in relation to the Gatwick drone incident, and nobody has really 100% been able to certify exactly what those facts are, and it's certainly not in the public domain. And that's one grateful thing we have, to the MPs that formed the Freedom of Information Act, is it's given us the power to make those requests. I mean, I know, and I've heard of people in government departments make Freedom of Information Act requests within their own department to find out what's going on.
Thank God for the Daily Mail. Thank God for the Daily Mail.
That's the power of the law, right?
Yeah, but have you thought about the idea that perhaps they don't want to release because it's embarrassing for them that didn't act according to anything, and they just acted on pressure from the media?
Yeah, it may well be embarrassing for them, but that's a pill they're going to have to swallow, unfortunately. At the end of the day, they were really happy. I mean, I did some radio interviews around the time because at the time I actually lived in Hawley, so Hawley's right next to Gatwick, and I drove down one of the roads that skirts around one of the approaches into Gatwick. I counted 11 or 12 police cars right on the periphery, and they're all inside, and it's at night. How are they going to locate a drone, right? And
so you drove around on the night in question.
Yeah, I was around, and
with his drone in his backpack just in case.
Yeah.
But
it's all coming together.
It was pretty nuts. But they were there for days and weeks, as we know, raking in the overtime, costing the taxpayer a fortune. And would somebody who's going to fly a drone be outside the perimeter fence doing it when you've got a DJI Phantom that's got a range of 4.3 kilometers? You're not. You're going to be a couple of kilometers away, probably concealed in a wood somewhere or something like that. You're going to fly it in using your live feed, do whatever it is you're going to do, and fly back again.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, what was the weather like on that? Was that the first night or the second night?
I can't remember now, Gary, but I don't think there was any precipitation. I think there was a light breeze or something like that. It was a bit cold.
That was the second night, then I think.
Cold
Remember,
is good for the batteries. Cold is good for the batteries. They don't get too warm, so they last a little longer.
yeah, absolutely.
Now, Richard seems to have thought this through very well. No wonder
he does. He said about woods. He said about
person of interest. I can see why they did that.
It's all coming together.
This is the problem when you have somebody who thinks logically.
Yeah.
It is interesting that will we ever get an answer on this? I think it is interesting. Either they're trying to delay this long enough that the chief officer goes and then the next poor guy comes in, because that's the MO of the police. We've seen that time and time again. When they've done something wrong, it's delayed long enough for the next set of leadership to come in, and then they get to stand there and say, we've investigated it and it was all a bit of a mess. I don't see why this is so difficult. What evidence did they have that there was a drone? Please provide it. Tell us why you made the decisions you made. It's that simple. It really is that simple.
Let's think about logically about this. Let's again follow the money. Who gained the most with all this situation? It's a matter that we have to think about it, because someone had to gain about all this entire mess, and I don't know. I really don't know. You guys are there. I'm over here on continental Europe, and the cases we've had didn't have the glamour of all the coverage of the media that you guys had, but okay, it's different. So,
Louis, I think you should flip the question the other way around, because I would ask the airport, how long was a drone threat on their risk register for?
Because, what does that mean? Tell me. I don't know what that means.
So generally, a board of a company would have a risk register. They would identify the risks to their company that they have to mitigate and deal with.
Right.
You'd expect that to happen from a competency point of view. So, we've been talking about the threat of drones for a number of years. So they must have had at some point drone incursion into the airspace on their risk register. When did they put that on there? Why is it then, if we assume, and I think it's a very fair assumption, that it's been on there for at least a couple of years, knowing that for the last 4 years we've had more notable drone incursions around the world, that any competent airport operator would certainly have that on their risk register, would be able to identify that this is a risk and we have to deal with it. You then follow that logic through. Well, how do we mitigate that risk? Because ultimately, if we have a drone incursion, there's going to be a cost impact. Well, we insure against that. So the insurance company would say, okay, you've identified drone incursion as a risk. What is it you're doing to mitigate that risk?
Yeah.
What equipment have you got to mitigate that risk?
Sorry.
And the reason, whatever it is, and the reason why they need to tell the insurance company that is because they want the insurance, but they want it at the lowest premium. So the insurance company needs to know, in order to give them a low premium, how they're mitigating that risk, so there's less likelihood of a claim.
All that thing, I think there were a lot of coincidences in time, like the workers' union having issues with the sale, the timing of the sale, all those events occurring more or less at the same time. It smells fishy.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a number of reports of airports procuring different types of equipment, but that's a matter for the airport and the contract that they have, and no doubt there's confidentiality agreements around that. that support whatever equipment it is that they've got in place.
I think we can say for there, at the time of the first reported sightings, there was no equipment on Gatwick.
Yeah, certainly that's what the media reported, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we pretty much know that.
And the airport relied on the police, and the police relied on the airport.
A blind leaving a blind.
Well, Gatwick had that. It was Gatwick that had a pretty well catalogued sighting, because it came up on a primary return came up when a light twin engine something or other was coming in from the northwest, and they had a primary return on a something. So that was definitely 2 or 3 years ago. Definitely.
Yeah.
I remember reading a report on that one.
So that's it. And clearly, the reason why they didn't want to mitigate that risk is because they just simply didn't want to allocate a budget for it.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, if you've got a risk on your risk register and you're responsible to your shareholders, because ultimately they're investing money in the company, you've got to act in a way that demonstrates that level of competency to be able to deal with that kind of risk. And that's, if I was a shareholder in the company that owned any airport, I would certainly be asking those kind of questions.
I'd very much like. We've tried the Freedom of Information Act requests on air traffic, but they are not bound by the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, I believe. Operational safety and security, I suppose, because I would very much like to see the SATCO's log for that evening. I'd very much like to see a timeline and the communications between each section. It's a little bit like you can imagine, like chicken licking, and the sky's falling in, the sky's falling in. I'd love to see how that chain of command went as it rolled out, but we can't seem to get to those. We'll try, but we can't seem to get there. That would be very, very telling. I'd love to know the timeline. It's madness.
Definitely,
it's madness. And well, hopefully, when our new European or our new CAA-based rules come in, they'll be able to order that can of worms open for everyone to see, to a free and equitable airspace for all users to be treated in the same way, perhaps.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You've probably seen my post on that on LinkedIn about ICAO's definition of UTM. Being it. Taking those principles of because of some of the research I'm doing in UTM at the moment, there is that fundamental principle that it's got to be equitable to all airspace users. And this is, if you were to take on the whole UTM piece, I would certainly want to make sure that PFCO holders do have that level of equity. I think general aviation is going to have to accept that a change is coming. And
they
hopefully,
haven't noticed yet. They haven't noticed
yet.
No,
I'm sure they haven't.
They haven't spotted it yet. Yeah.
But it's going to happen, and hopefully the CAA can deal with that, on their own terms post the end of this year, and we can get moving a lot quicker. We have to.
I have to ask: is there much real aviation? I only have positive experiences with people from the CAA, even when they were telling me off. And you back in the day, like a chap that used to be a real rogue on the air show circuit ended up being in charge of air shows, poacher turned gamekeeper styly operations. Is there real aviation experience left in the CAA is what I'm saying, or is it all just graduates now?
I think, to be fair to the CAA, they'd have some great experience in there, and they do pull a lot of experience from the RAF and other places. Do they have the experience around the UAS? Certainly, when I was there, I was the only one that had ever flown a drone that had gone through the whole process of having a PFCO. And for me, that was a great concern, and I when I was there, I propagated the fact that everybody in in the CAA who deals with drones should just go out and get their own PFCO, go through that process. To really understand the process, I firmly believe you have to go through it, which is why, as a lawyer, it's one of the reasons why I did it myself. I fly drones because I really understand what's involved in going through this process and and really understand how it impacts PFCO holders. So, to be fair to the CAA, I said to them, they have some great experience there. Whether, like any organization, there's always natural attrition, whether it's through retirement or people moving on, and how they replace that experience, I don't know. That's a question for them. But hopefully, I'd like to think that, they're getting the right people. But, we've got to pay the money for it. And if they haven't got the budget, they're not going to get it.
Yes. Now, Bruce, your Civil Aviation Authority, they've been up to some shenanigans, not in our world, the drone world, but in the gliding world.
Yes, you are correct, Gary. They have. There's been a lot of stuff going on down in our South Island, which is a very popular gliding area because there's a lot of, we've got the Southern Alps, so you get wave lift and all sorts of cool things. It's a great place to fly gliders. And there's a lot of flat land as well. So it's a really good place, and it attracts people from all around the world, and they hold competitions there. But the Civil Aviation, first of all, I think they classified the airspace as controlled because we've got Mount Cook Airport in there, and so all the gliders had to have ADS-B fitted and so forth, which is they've already got FLAM, but they had to put ADS-B in, I think. And then they were under the control of air traffic control, and now they've decided that gliding is no longer a hobby, a recreation, but it's an adventure sport. So the companies that are running there's a glider operation there which runs a lot of stuff. They're having to completely change, or would have had to change completely, to become a tourism adventure operator rather than just the operator of a gliding club. And they've said, too hard, too much money, can't do it. And they've decided to toss in the towel at the cost of 20-something jobs and just throw their hands up and go, you're making it too hard for us, we give up. And so they've shut down. Well, they're shutting down. It's a case of bureaucrats just focus too intently on some small thing without a view of the big picture. And, it's the intent is maybe there, but the implementation is completely flawed. They've just, completely nixed all these jobs and a great tourist attraction and a great facility in the South Island. It leaves me scratching my head. What are they doing? Have they got nothing better to do? Surely there must be more coffee and scones they could eat.
And you've also, this week, I see you've been soliciting donations from large American organizations and a giant Chinese organization that you now favor.
Oh, yes. Well, no, I'm fully sponsored by the Commercial Drone Alliance. Thank you. I haven't got the T-shirt ready yet. I just rearranged these letters.
Very good. I see what you did there.
Alliance.
Very good. Yeah. I see what you did there. Yes.
Yeah. But I did read the submission that DJI made on the NPRM and the one that Google Wing made. And they're actually quite supportive of the hobby and the recreational drone operator, which is good because they probably carry a lot more clout than you or I would individually. And they've come out swinging for it. They've acknowledged the importance of the hobby and the amateur side of things for the future of innovation and technology, and that we have a place out there and that we shouldn't be basically pushed out over time with this stupid thing where non-compliant craft have to be flying in grassy fields in the middle of nowhere. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that, because as I said, 50,000 or 52,000 submissions is a small number compared to the total population of registered drone operators in the USA. But when you compare it to other NPRMs that have been out there, it's a huge response. I don't think they've had a response to an NPRM this big for a long time, if ever. So I pity the poor sods that have got to read those 52,000 submissions, especially when some of them, like DJI's, is 80-something pages. I think the Wing one is over 100 pages. It's a lot of manpower is going to be required. And so I think it's going to take if it goes ahead at all, it's going to take a lot longer than anyone thinks.
Well, but now, because of local or recent stories, perhaps there won't be any airlines to avoid anyway. So it's cool. We can have the sky back. Fantastic.
I think once you've lost it, they'll sell it back to you, but they won't give it back to you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting here is that regulators are now making some really good money out of the drone community. It was money they didn't have before. So the fact is, because they are now making such good money, they should be resourcing it properly. And they should be, the service should be good. So, going to your point, Bruce, yeah, they've got to read, tens of thousands of responses, but they should most certainly have the manpower to do it.
Well, it's an interesting point, isn't it? I wonder if the RPAS world is getting to the tipping point of paying more, because at the end of the day, if you take the UK, they can't make now they'll be swapping back their EASA ATPLs for British ones, but there can't be more than, I don't know, 5,000 ATPLs and two. And I'm just making some numbers now. Let's say 5,000 ATPLs, 3,000 CPLs, and I don't know, another 5,000 PPLs. That's not a huge number, but they're taking, £9 off. Well, that's another conversation to be had, but £9 off all those aero modelers and all the fees for the PFCO holders and all that sort of thing. I wonder if we get to the point where the RPAS model aircraft injury is paying as much as the manned.
But the thing is, I don't mind paying a fee for something as long as I'm getting something in return.
Yeah.
But what are they going to give me that I don't already have for free? You can't just say, we're going to tax the air now. You've got to say, well, this is of course, that drone thing where they'll find your drone for you if it gets lost. That's where the value comes, isn't it? But if you lose, find my drone or something.
I want some protections. If someone shoots me drone out the sky with a catapult,
exactly.
I want them to come round and sort that out. If I'm to be an aircraft and afforded the protections that aircraft are protected, I want them. That's what they come around and enforce.
And I want guaranteed spaces to fly, guaranteed right to fly, because if I'm paying money, I expect a return on it. Otherwise, it's a breach of, in this country, the Consumer Guarantees Act, where descriptions of a product must be accurate. So but the thing is that the hobby as such is so small, I don't think they'll ever get enough money out of it to do anything. Because a lot of people are saying, I'm just not going to bother, I'll put my models away, or I'm not going to register, I'm not going to do this, or they'll just use the civil disobedience thing and not register anyway, in which case you're going to have a massive enforcement arm. But where is the funding going to come from outside of fines and penalties to enforce these rules if nobody's paying their registration fees? I think focus on the commercial operators. They're the ones who have got the might and the money to pay the fees, and they're the ones that are going to get the most out of it, because they're going to have the probably little airlanes they can fly in set aside airspace, UTMs, all these things which are providing value to them. But the hobbyist is getting nothing back, nothing they haven't had for countless years. So it becomes a penalty on them. It becomes a fine. It becomes a sanction on the model flyer who's done nothing wrong. Well, I have, but other model flyers haven't.
Yeah, I think when you look at commercial operators, we're going to see a switch from regulators, and the switch is going to be more towards the Amazons, the Googles, who have economies of scale, because for every platform that they put in the air, there will be a fee charged somewhere along the line, and so you'll end up with the small commercial operators, who are doing what it is that they do. And then you'll have the big ones, and the small commercial operators will just be swept up in amongst the big ones, to the point where it may become cost prohibitive, because
that's when I was just going to say, but that's when, because Thales have always had a vision that they want to put big platforms on station and sell data to the police, fire, farming. They want to do that for years. They've been pushing that, so that's good. Let's push all those little ones aside, get those things on station. We don't need them anymore. Sorry, just tinfoil conspiracy theory again, but they have wanted to do that for years. And so then your Amazons, your Googles, and your Thales. Job done. We don't need anyone else.
And this is it. The motivation for the regulator is it's the bigger income stream for less work or the same work. And that's the point. So the regulator then employs economies of scale within their own organization. They start reaping in more cash for the bigger players. And this is where we're going to find a challenge towards that UTM ICAO principle, where there should be equity for all users. And this is where I think, certainly in some of the research that I've been doing, where I think we're going to find some real sticking points.
And the jet suit in England, what do we think that needs to be licensed? It probably doesn't, because it's probably under all sorts of ultralight weight limits. You can probably fly that like it's a paraglider, I should think, or something like that. I bet you it is. Bet you he doesn't need a license for it. Yeah. Well, I just thought this conversation has got my brain a bit befuddled, Richard. It's all amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. Now, what's the time now? Has anyone else seen anything else this week? What else have we seen this week?
Mavic Air 2 pictures leaked. Did you see that one, Ian?
I did. I saw it earlier.
What was it you said last week, Ian? What were you saying last week about release date?
NDA.
I can no. I'm a little disappointed in what I've seen, if I'm honest. If you take the Mavic Air, have any of you here had the Mavic Air or owned one? I had one in your hand.
Yeah.
The industrial design on the Mavic Air was outstanding. If you just take the design of the aircraft, the way they did it, it had. DJI used to spend a lot of time on their industrial design as well as the functionality and everything. If anything, the hardware was well ahead of the software at times as well. And the Mavic Air was very much crafted. It had little metal grills around the air vents. It was very nicely done. And they seem to have moved into this grey flying folding box territory. If you look at the Mavic 2, the Mavic Mini, okay. Does it make a difference? No.
Cost cutting, Ian.
You're probably right. And, if you look, the original Mavic was very similar. It had some nice little touches here and there. And the Mavic Air, when I first saw it, I actually had one on pre-release. I was lucky to be able to get one. And the day I saw it, it always reminded me of Sony. It was like having something from Sony in your hand. You always know Sony makes something solid. You pick something up from Sony and you know what it is. And I saw the pictures today. It looks interesting. I don't know where the Air can go now. It's sort of been overtaken by the Mini. The Mavic Pro, the Air filled a lovely gap between the Spark and the Mavic Pro, and then the Mavic 2 took it a step further. But the Mini is sort of where the Air is now. But I don't know if there is a middle gap anymore that's needed.
Just out of interest, Ian, did it have a CE marking on it?
There's no stickers. There's no barely. It looks like it's been dragged down the road a little bit. Actually, it's quite roughed up. If it is an Air, no one knows if it is. It says the words Mavic on it. No one knows is it legitimate. I'd be leaning towards it being so because those of us who follow this stuff have been here so many times in the past. Whenever something like this lands, you tend to think it is legit. Is it a replacement for the Air? I don't know. The remote looks a bit odd. They've bulked it out, and it looks like the phone's going to go on the top. Don't know what it's. There's not a lot to say, and I don't know what gap it fills. I'm struggling unless they're going to put OcuSync on it, and then you're going to have a really small aircraft with OcuSync.
That didn't come under 250, did it?
No.
It probably does now. It's got the Tatio frame. Maybe that's what they're doing.
I think it would probably still be over, but the Mavic 2 is small enough. You don't really. What was great about the Air has probably been my favorite aircraft in the last 3 years because it was as good as the original Mavic Pro in 90% of what it did, and it was tiny. And looking at these pictures, I just don't. It looks bigger. Actually, if you look at the picture of him holding it on his side, it looks bigger. I don't know. It obviously, look, we're in the releases are going to come. Last week, Autel said they're basically going to fulfill all of their releases by the end of the month. DJI put out a statement to say they're not expecting any holdups now. China's back in action. We're full steam ahead. So the reality is I would expect to see a whole slew of aircraft in the next 6-7 months, probably to fill the gap for the next 2 years of this legislation, because they can't wait forever. We know it's going to be 2 years, whatever happens. So it's bonkers to think they're not going to release anything for 2 years. I think they were going to wait to the mid-year, but not until then.
But on the industrial side, also the V3, we don't know much about it yet. The M210 V3, because after the shot in their own foot with the batteries of the V2 that cannot fly, let's see how they can sort that question. I'm more curious about what the M210 V3 comes up than any of the tiny drones. Come on, the tiny drones are the Mavic sub 250 and then the Mavics around 1 kilo, and perhaps the phantoms if they kill it or not. And the rest is the industrial ones that they also don't do any upgrades to the Inspires, and that's it.
I think the Inspire is an interesting category. I think I've always said the Sunny market is nowhere near as big as everyone thinks it is, and people have been saying for years they're going to sell loads. I think the Inspire became a tinier market the day the M200 was released, because so many people were using the Inspire 1 for industrial and Cine, and the second the M200 dropped, I think it probably took away almost the largest market for the Inspire series towards industrial users, and it just left the Cine drone on the side. And the reality is, it's still ProRes RAW, it's still Cinema DNG, it's got a camera which is Super 35. No one else has done anything like it, not even remotely like it. So why change?
The pros don't care much about the DJI cameras. They want to get their Alexas, their Aries, and for that they go the huge Altas, and that's it.
And that's where the Ultra X has been. The Ultra X, I still think that was a strange release. I still don't, who's going to hang a 30 grand payload under 4 rotors? I still don't see anyone with, why would you not just fly an Alta 6 or an Alta 8 instead of the X? I get some ideas for it, but I don't. Perhaps you know something I don't, Louis, on that one.
No, just about the same.
Yeah.
It's a problem of having a lineup of drones for every need. Perhaps the small one will make for the smaller red cameras. I really don't know.
I think I've seen somewhere where EASA have published draft specifications for CE markings for different kinds of drones. I'm sure I've seen something.
Yeah, it's in the 2019 945.
Yeah,
but it's pretty much everything below the upper weight limit was 4 kilos, and then everything above that is into the standard 20. It's funny.
They've got to be paying attention to that. Manufacturers certainly must be paying attention to that in order to anticipate what's coming down the line.
It's interesting. Some are. Autel clearly are not, because they've just released a drone which is bigger and heavier than the last one, and will push it outside the new legislation, not within.
Is it 25K?
It's no, it's not that. It's about 1.2 kilos, but the limit's 900 grams to get into A2, A1.
Oh, I see. That level, yeah.
So it's interesting. Like the Mavic 2 is about a kilo. 988 grams. It's just over, but it's conceivable it can be brought down within it with a newer version. But it's interesting. You got other manufacturers going the other way. They're making them heavier.
That's because he also lets you have 25 kilos as opposed to the 20 that we're used to in the UK.
What'd you say, Louis? What to do?
No. And that DJI clearly is looking, because they did the 2 versions of the Mini with a sub 50 and a sub 200 grams for Japan, which is so they're very.
While we've got Perry Mason here, perhaps he can clarify the situation with the personal data collection device on a drone. We were talking about it a few weeks ago. If you've got a personal data collection device, you have to register even under 250 grams under EASA rules. Now, is an FPV camera without any form of recording, you put on a drone flying over a grassy field in the middle of nowhere where there are no people around, does that mean it doesn't have to be registered because it's not can't collect any personal data like that?
Yes, it is, and the broadcast can be captured and recorded. It's not.
No, if you've encrypted it, and then no one can capture it.
On Bruce, it's not the act that you're recording; is the possibility of being recorded. So, if it has the possibility of being recorded, and we have a lawyer here. If it has that possibility, it falls down on those rules.
But what if there's no people around? Then there's no personal data to collect.
And a tree falls over.
I'd be tempted to go for the black letter law on this. And if it says that the device should record or must be recording, then it should be. But if you remove its capability to record, then I think that's a different question.
then you'll have to re-register the vehicle because you've changed its characteristics. So it's always a mess. You know that better than me, Richard.
It's just leaving out the SD card, though.
It's a rabbit hole.
Does the legislation include SD card?
Well, it says data captured of it gets awfully complex. And you know, I mean, I side with Bruce on it personally. I do agree that if it isn't recording and it has no capability of recording at either end, so whether it be land or at the other side, then I don't see that it's data protection, because what is the difference between, you know, okay, it doesn't say visual data. There's all sorts of data. You could have a sensor that measures temperature and
data for data protection purposes is identifiable information. And that's your face. You know, CCTV cameras in the UK, as you know, we all know there's bloody hundreds of them. You know, they capture your face. That's an image. That's data. So if you remove the ability of the drone to capture somebody's face, then you've removed the ability to capture data.
So even a normal FPV camera at standard definition can't make out a face from more than a couple of meters away. That wouldn't qualify.
But surely a house's data then. Does it just have to be a person? What's
person? It has to be a live person.
Person, does it?
It is interesting. So where does software come into it that masks? Because all you've then got to do is introduce enough software, which we've got in CCTV and everything already, that's able to mask a recognizable face. Then technically there's ways around it, isn't there?
But then surely you've got to prove it's doing that when it's flying, aren't you? Sort of opening up a huge can of worms.
So this is it. So to get to the point where ultimately you'd have to demonstrate in court that your drone complied with the law, you're going to need a drone expert. Now you could just tap in drone experts and thousands will just pop up everywhere.
There's 6 of them here.
Yes. For a small fee, everything.
Can I smell? You know, I can smell shilling. Were they? Well,
I sort of say shilling. I was listening to that collapse of WeWork, that company in America. I was listening to that.
Yeah, they're still functioning.
I don't know. But there's some professor chap that says fake it until you make it is a legitimate business strategy now. I said, what? You know.
Well, we do have something in law called misrepresentation.
Yeah.
On that image capture.
Is that that's what we get? Fake it till you make it. Misrepresentation. Okay. Yeah.
But on that image capture issue, for instance, we have a law here in Portugal from 1953 or 1958 that you absolutely cannot take any images or videos from the air. And if you take the letter to the law, you have to always ask permission to the Air Force. So if your drone has a camera, you have to take permissions from the Air Force, and you have to submit a request to the Air Force to get that permission. If you take the law to the letter, if you throw up your cell phone in the air while recording, you have to ask permission. So that's how stupid the laws can be. So it's what's
expert, strip under pressure.
Never ending. Some other things this week we did see, Gary. Obviously, there's a new RoboMaster coming out in Japan, China, and the Middle East.
Have they toughened up the USB ports on this one?
That one doesn't have USB issues, unfortunately. It's going to cause a little bit of a stir. Beginning to cause a little bit of a stir because it isn't programming. It is compatible, but they've taken it to a whole new level. But that doesn't come back to the existing model. So it's causing a little bit of upset there. There was something else I saw.
So what do you mean by that? It's not backwards compatible.
Okay, they've released it with.
The biggest news of the week is that. The biggest news of the week is that the Ardu Pilot conference has been cancelled. It was going to happen in Canberra, Australia, end of March. And instead, we are going for virtual conferences. So we have to be, until the end of the week, we'll be preparing the schedule and having the virtual conferences open to everyone that wants to attend.
And that'll be cool. That'll be handy in a lot of ways. So
yeah,
be cool.
we were already going to live stream as much as we could, and we will also have we were going to record it and post it on the YouTube, like we did last year, perhaps with somewhat better conditions to record this time, but due to the recent events and cancellations and restrictions that are in place, so we thought it better to cancel the event and delay it. So if people have already booked, try to reschedule for next year. We are already tentatively going to 26 March 2021. I think it's the date, but we have an announcement on our site where this is all explained. We were discussing this till late my time zone, early Australia time zone. But yeah, that is a big shame, because we already have almost 100 participants on the conference in Australia. So it was a very big event for Argo pilots.
Yeah, events to get over.
It is a shame, but it's all going to be online, Louis, yeah?
We are trying to be, we have already identified what we can do. So, and we'll be having at least 2 blocks. We were discussing this last night, having a block that would be time zone friendly for the other side of the world, and a time block that would be fine for us on the right side of the world.
Absolutely. Did I see, Ian, you had another bit of shenanigans in your hand there?
Yeah, sorry, it's the first print off the new printer. It literally, I started it before we went live. This is.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, no, the paint is dry here, Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, this is the first print off the new printer. The first print. I was just inspecting it. That's why I've been keeping an eye on it. If anyone's wondering why I've been going, what's going on over here? I've been making sure that it hasn't totally screwed up. I spent the last.
Well, there you go. Look.
What you got there, Lou?
Another one.
Tape.
Another
Is
one.
that masking tape?
Yeah.
No. Dual
victim coercion tape.
No. 2 color printer.
I got my Flash Forge, but I've just built a process, so it's just finished. I spent 8 hours or so building that from the kit, on and off. So,
what is the widget that you've printed?
It is a boat. It is a test print.
Oh yes, that's the test print.
It's a test print that's meant to put them through hell. It's not particularly.
Oh, I see.
It's bleachy.
Yeah.
Can you change the material on your printer, Ian?
Yes.
Use different types of materials.
Yeah, you can use PLA, which is mineral, basically mineral-based plastic. You got ABS, which is oil.
Right.
You've got there's loads in there, Louis. It never ends.
PLA,
carbon fiber,
TPU,
gold.
TPU, carbon. You could do carbon. It likes to. Carbon hates me. I've tried. I haven't tried. I know someone who's tried wood filament, and that's real not worth trying. That can end really badly.
There's a PET filament now too, isn't there?
Yeah, PET. Yeah, there's lots of filament, and the PLA is the most common one, and it's corn and starch based.
Yeah.
So it's quite.
So you can eat it. Fantastic.
You can lick it without any problems at all. It tastes quite sweet. It does taste quite sweet.
Let's print some lunch. Yes.
There we go. It always ends up like this.
Yeah, well, I'm not. You're not doing social distancing from 3D print. It's perfectly fine to lick your 3D print. Don't worry. It's not gonna. You're not gonna catch any human malware from licking 3D prints.
Now think of the things you could print, eh? Yes.
But yes, no. So the RoboMaster. it's a new platform, so all of the new features, the new robotic arms, the new sensors are not backwards compatible with the old one, which is frustrating.
Back to Lego and Meccano, right?
You what, sorry?
Well, funny enough. Look,
back to Lego and Meccano.
Lego, did you say? Back to Lego?
Yeah,
they flipping just changed. They're going to flipping Scratch. They've got a really good language of this for school. I got to flipping learn another one now.
You got to get Scratch now, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to Scratch, which is painful. But there we are.
They always have a very intuitive processing language to their robotics kids. Come on, my kid was 3 months old, and I bought it a robotics investment series. Why would you want a Lego this big, full of possibilities of programming?
They changed the programs. They changed the method because the old one doesn't work on the new Macs. So they changed it to work on the Macs, and they've changed it to Mac.
Apple have messed around with all of the drivers in the last 2 OS X releases and completely screwed a lot of stuff up. So
it was based on Adobe Flash, so it had a lot of development environments, and that's something that I had a virtual machine only to have the Lego stuff. So.
Yeah, is there a robotic COBOL for these things? Do they do a COBOL for robotics?
I think they also do assembly, Bruce. Don't worry.
Yes. Oh God, assembly. Oh no. It's just Nicola doesn't know what we're talking about. He does not know what we're talking about. He doesn't know at all. I don't either, really.
He's asleep with his eyes open, isn't he?
He is. He is. So what else have we seen this week before we go? Because what have we got? Look, we've got an hour 26 over.
There was a couple of other things. I'm trying to remember what there was. Nicola, what about your plane? Have you found it yet?
He's reading something.
Come on, give us some bloody good news on this plane.
I found Nicola's plane. Look, I found.
Well, I think we already talked about that. Yeah, not that one. I think we already talked about that, and I can see that the mats are closed.
You didn't put it on. That's us told now, isn't it? That is us told.
Well, fake finding it kind of lame. So.
And Andrew Dibbins in the comments, did we ever hear from Ian's Freedom of Information requests? If it's the ones we're talking about the other week, that's some American ones. We've got some stuff, but Ian's ones are also, there is some stuff going on, and Richard's got some fantastic ones. So if you've just joined us, Andrew, you should rewind a little bit afterwards and listen to what Richard had to say. But suffice to say that Gatwick is dealing with quite a few, or the police are dealing with quite a few Freedom of Information Acts. And goodness knows what the press must be putting them out there as well. I know the Register is having a go at them as well. So eventually, if enough of us are shaking the tree, some apples will fall. Quite what they'll be.
Everything from UK, they don't care much about that. They only bother with Megxit or exits. So that's the story of the day. So these things, not even Brexit is news outside of UK any longer. So
yeah, I know. So what else? In the comments, Mark JJ was asking about the M300. What do you know about that?
I said M210 V10. Yes, M300s. That's the correct name. And no, just no big concrete news that we can talk about, except that leak from Drone DJ a couple of weeks ago. And that's the most that most people know. But Ian is looking like a cat, so he's already flown one M300, right, Ian? No.
No, Your Honor. No.
I have not seen or flown an M300.
Much. Anyway, EASA exit, says Gorilla Drones. That doesn't roll off the tongue so nicely, does it?
Arse exit.
Arse exit, yeah.
Arse exit.
Yeah, no. You have to come up with something else on that.
No. I'm trying to think. There was some other stuff. NQE's getting all wound up tight. We've covered that. There was something else. I can't remember what it was. No.
Bruce causing trouble. That's
Bruce causing trouble.
Bruce Jaguar.
I see some emergency response workers lost. Was it a mattress or something into the drink?
Yes.
Because they flew it too long and it was too much wind and it couldn't get back or something. So they're changing their processes to account for stronger winds. Only cost them. Had a $30,000 camera? Flare camera or something. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's just procedures, isn't it? I mean, that's just operating procedures.
On the drone, on the 210 and the battery issues, I did pick up a couple of weeks ago that I think there've been 16 issues. So I'm going to write something on LinkedIn about defective products, because I think this potentially, as more and more manufacturers or more new platforms come online, until they get through their teething problems, we're going to have more of these kind of defects. And I think this one came about because, well, not only did the CAA say, hang on a minute, we're stopping you flying the M210. So for me, that potentially is a claim against the manufacturer. In my view, I'm not here to give legal advice, obviously, but my view would be, hang on a minute, if I've bought a product and it doesn't work and the regulator have said you can't fly it, then surely there must be, I would think, for me, I would make a claim against the manufacturer. But what we've then subsequently seen are a number of issues where that platform hasn't performed in the way that it should, in the way that it's been represented by the manufacturer. So I'll put something out about that in the next week or so, because I think, that could potentially be a bit symptomatic of more of what we're going to see. And you guys have talked on the last couple of months about different products coming to market and failing, and then something else happens. And there are no shortage of examples. So I think it'll be quite interesting to see how operators and other users deal with that in the future.
It is going to be interesting to see when they get their big boy pants on. Is probably the term I use, and I've talked about this, is somewhat drones have been in the consumer electronics side of things more than the aviation side of things, probably for the last 4 or 5 years, and failure has been accepted. It's always hard to separate failure off from users doing silly things. With the M200, there was a clear issue within a certain set of behavior in the battery. It was still very manageable if the people looked. The problem is a lot of the time the people weren't looking. At the end of the day, if you check the voltages, it was there for you to see. The problem is when there was a fuel gauge, people weren't trained to look at the voltages. People were trained at the fuel gauge. And, everyone I saw, you could see, I seen about 30 logs, and every one, before it took off, the issue is clear to see. However, that data wasn't what was being trained as part of the NQE courses. The reality is you had large amounts of police and fire and the guys using these sitting in rooms with very little understanding about battery care and maintenance. They were cycling packs, keeping them constantly charged for 4 or 5 days at a time and then taking them out flying. And there's any wonder that they were not expecting to have issues, but they're trying to use it like a laptop was the term I always used. They were charging it on a Monday and expecting it to do the same on a Friday. But there was also a clear failure. The way the reporting system worked wasn't working correctly.
Most likely the issues, and I deal with hundreds of batteries. The biggest issue is not so much the hardware of the batteries, but the constant updating of firmware of the batteries themselves. And I think they're trying to rush up updates, especially on the batteries. With the most problems we've had with the 200 series are with the batteries. You get a warning, I need to update this battery, and you go, what? These batteries were updated yesterday, so you're always on trying to catch up. And the most problems we've seen, and dealing with hundreds of batteries and doing hundreds of cycles every day on batteries, we have quite a track record of batteries of TB50s, TB55s, and TB47s.
Yeah.
And have you ever had a failure, Louis? Have you had one go?
Batteries?
Have you had a aircraft failure as a result of a pack?
No.
And it's interesting because I know you guys run so many of them, and again, but you've also said in the past about your stringent battery management. You guys have a lot of procedures in for it, and it just proves the point of, for me, yes, it wasn't right. However, if the policies were in place correctly to run an industrial or commercial drone the way you should, there was close to no risk. And all of the issues around this were, I've seen some horrendous logs where I've spoke to people and they've said, yeah, I charged it Monday, and you go, it's Sunday. And what did you do? And you just went, we picked the packs up and fly. And you go in, before you've taken off, the voltages are screaming at you, something is wrong. And whilst the fuel gauge isn't, the voltages are off. And I think for commercial operations in the UK, there needs to be a lot more emphasis on battery management. It's just not in there.
No. It's a crazy issue. So much that one of the issues that we've had with the 210s V2, which is the TB55 batteries, we've had to develop an in-house system to charge them like we had the nice battery charging system from the V1. So we have to develop our own, and the operational procedure is very stringent. You always take the batteries to your hotel room. You always charge your batteries in the night. You always charge the batteries first thing when you arrive to the field. Anything that happens, you just discard that pair and use another pair. That's for the 210s. For the 600s, it's 6 batteries, but it's the same.
But they've not had the same issues. Now, those batteries, that issue has now been resolved. The issue has been mitigated in software. The update resolves that. What they've had to do, and a couple of people have kicked off about this, is you'll find on the TB50s on the M200, people have said they've lost flight time with a new update, and most of that is because DJI have put a bit more in reserve than there was before. And
I believe that they went from 3.2 to 3.3 volts.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little more conservative.
Yeah.
But you always fly down until, 10%'s a lot, isn't it? I could be 2 kilometers away, still get back with 10%.
Come on, our standard operating procedure is to land with 50%.
Yeah.
So
I'm a little bit brave.
But which 50%?
Which way? Yeah, which 50?
You might not be right. 3.85 volts, Louis. But no, and it is.
I panic below 30% and try and be on the ground at 40%.
But let me give you another example. This week, Parrot issued a new firmware for their batteries, and my God, it was the most painful update that I've ever done to a drone. I had 3 bricks because the update failed, and I was lost at a loss of what to do. So finally came up with a standard crazy procedure from someone on Facebook that said, try this 15 seconds on this stage, 18 seconds on that stage, and then press the button. Oh my God. So all manufacturers suffer from these issues, and because Parrot and AFI users were complaining about the battery, so the guys went out and issued a new firmware for the battery. So,
but we can't. But the thing is, we're playing in a different world, aren't we, to consumer electronics? We're playing in a world where the thing's in the air, so we really ought to, before we release a firmware, make sure it's all tickety boo and solid testing.
I've said for a long time, I think I think these things should be twice the cost. You know, one of the DJ's biggest issues on their industrial line is they're still doing it too cheap. And the interesting thing Richard went about
800 euros one set of batteries. Come on,
not the batteries, the aircraft, not the batteries, just the aircraft.
The aircraft, 15Ks for a drone.
Come on, price and alta. Come on.
It should be like inkjet printers to give away the drone and make the money out of the batteries. But look, I have this battery management technique. This is cheap. It doesn't have any firmware. I put it on the drone. I fly it. The drone runs out of battery. It exercises its return to ground. I take it back.
Well, that's what the F200 was doing.
Yeah.
So to about when the EASA hits, we get A2C, COPS, little knowledge of this sort of stuff. Well, then, but isn't that natural selection? They don't stay in business for very long. Isn't that what happens?
But the problem is, where do we end with it? You know, if you suddenly get, and this is the interesting thing, you suddenly get, right, a load of these A2 COFCs come in, and then they crash left, right, and center and complete proper flight reports. That is suddenly going to change the landmark, the way we view crash reports at the moment. If you look at how many drone crash reports, the only reason we saw so many M200s is because it was police and fire for the largest part of them. It was a lot of police. The
last one was the police shouting at somebody to get out of the way as it fell out of the sky.
If it was standard operators, most of these would never have been heard of. You know, and what's going to happen when we get all of these guys doing it? I do think they have to get a lot safer. You know, at the end of the day, they've been very much, and that's all the manufacturers, not one. They all need to get dearer. They all, you know, people who always say drones are expensive. Compare it to anything else in aviation, it's a bargain. At the end of the day, you could buy a flying camera for less than £1,000 that will fly for 20 minutes, and people complain when it falls out of the sky.
So making it more expensive will make it safer. Let's just double the cost and make it twice as safe then.
I think there needs to be a lot more investment in that side of things, and that's going to result in cost. You know, so
yeah, but also we already have some experience. So that experience piles up, and we end up getting better systems. Come on, you cannot clearly compare what you get today with an out-of-the-box M10 V2 RTK with what you would get 5 years ago from a Phantom Vision.
I think Ian, your request is going to happen because by default a CE marking will increase the cost of any platform.
Yeah.
You know, because it has to go through whatever hurdles it has to go through, and it's another layer of bureaucracy, and with bureaucracy comes cost.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're already expecting that with the CE markings and all the stamps. Come on, we have drones that have stamps from all over Europe, license plates from all over Europe. So
I'm involved. We've got an ADSB equip an aircraft now. We have to find a country where we can easily get the proper the code for it and everything. It's an impossible thing to do here in South Africa. So we might have to go and register something in the UK, put it on the G register or another country to then come back and fly in Africa. It's a nonsense.
For airplanes that there was a country in Europe that was very cheap to register regular airplanes, and everybody went to register their airplanes there.
Was it? I'll have to have a look because I know if you want to do stuff digitally, Lithuania is very good. You can become a digital citizen and stuff. I'll have to look at that. And they make nice gliders in Lithuania. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of
batteries are good. The batteries are good. Yeah, they use them in Teslas, those Lithuanian batteries.
Oh, no, I walked into that. I was over, there's a door, I just smacked my face on there. Oh, I see there's been another fire in another UTM machine. I can't remember which one, but a second one in 2 weeks has burned itself out on the pad. I wonder if they're finding it a little bit harder than they thought. The largest hot air balloon in the world was a Nashua 850, and it was not impossible to fly, but the weather had to be absolutely perfect. It was costing a guy a fortune, and it blew up mysteriously in a lay-by near Newbury on the A4. I wonder if some of the UTM, UAM, urban air mobility machines are doing that. I wonder. No, anyway, I mean, far be from me to suggest that. I mean, because I wouldn't. But yeah, so another, I can't remember which one it was, but another one's gone up with the battery fire. Now, what else? What else have we got, gentlemen?
It looks like Ian's playing with his Star Trek replicator. What's it going to make for you?
No.
Microphone, Ian.
A new microphone would be good.
Microphone, yeah.
Sorry, let me just scratch my head. No, yeah, sorry, I was just looking. I got to adjust the Z axis. It's not quite right. So the joy
we
of
can see that from here.
Yeah. Louis knows the pain of 3D
6,000 miles away, and it's obvious.
Yeah. Z axis is off, so I got to get that finished.
Yeah,
Earl Grey, hot.
No, other than that, I think that's about it for this week. I can't think. Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting watching this EASA business play out. Oh, what's he got here? Is that drugs? That looks like drugs.
Is that the cure to the human malware?
No,
coronavirus
it's for your axis. Real touch.
Oh,
Nice.
Okay. And what are you using that for?
It's an antivirus for coronavirus.
It's the cure.
Demonetized!
Demonetized.
That's that done. We've gone all that way.
I'm so sorry.
We didn't brief you, did we?
I'm not used to this. I don't understand the rules around monetization. I apologize.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. You have just cost me the froth off the top of a pint. Not even any of the beer, but just some of the.
My God, I feel so bad. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it must be maybe as much as 25 pence, maybe 30 even. If we're very, very lucky. So it's extraordinary.
There's going to be a competition that the people who are, or the person that's watching this live we're going to run a sweepstakes. How long before someone mentions the demonetization word? You can give a prize.
It's never long in all these videos, is it?
Is YouTube.
Is Heineken also a demonetization word?
What's demonetize?
Yeah.
Heineken. No, Heineken's fine.
Okay, so we can speak about the Heineken's problem.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they haven't demonetized if you say the word demonetized as well. You'd assume if YouTube are going to go that road, they may as well just block that as well. But
what about the live comments? Does that act as a demonetization?
No, I don't think it trolls them. It's their magic algorithm that listens to every word you say, converts it into text, and sends it to their servers and logs it forever.
Wow.
It's true.
But other than that.
But
we still love you, Google.
Yeah, that's right. He's in a big suck-up week this week, isn't he? Big suck-up week.
Quick say, I haven't seen this. I need to go and watch one of Bruce's videos then. What have I missed? I've missed something, clearly.
Yeah, he sucks up to Google and to...
Oh my God, it's so funny to see Bruce saying, "Oh, these DJI boys are so good. They even created an 87-page report. I didn't have time to read it, but it's very big."
as we know, size always impresses Bruce. We know that's the main thing for Bruce. Good day to you, Sky Pilot. Just because you're here, we're going now. Now you've arrived, we best go. Thanks very much, dear viewer. That's it, lad, gents. So we put the hammer down on this one, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
Going once, going twice.
Thank
you very much, everybody. Thanks for turning up. Richard, thank you. I'm going to have to rewatch again your main bit and think aloud some more about it all. Ian and Louis, Mr. Shaky and Nicola, thank you very much indeed. Dear viewer, wherever you are in the world, have a lovely, safe week. Join us again, 2100 GMT next Tuesday, when we will no doubt talk some more nonsense, and the EASA thing no doubt will have unraveled itself a little bit more. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care. Good night, everyone. Be careful. Cheers.